I want to talk just a little bit about a progressive agenda for the 2020 election. The loss by Hillary Clinton may have opened a door for a progressive agenda if only people will take advantage of it and get moving. Instead, the Democrats seem intent on blaming everybody but themselves, refusing to take the blame for the fact that they lost the election. They had a lousy candidate, and they believed they were going to win an election that they were actually going to lose. And one of the big reasons for that was Hillary Clinton. And it's not just a matter of the presidential election. People should remember that Republicans won the House and Senate as well. So what would be a good progressive agenda toward 2020? What should the Democrats or somebody else, which actually might be more likely, be looking to accomplish? Well, the first one is universal health care. Obamacare didn't solve the problem. Chances are Trump care won't either. So health care will continue to be a huge opportunity probably in the years to come, and if what occurs during the next 4 years doesn't fix the problem, there will be a tremendous opportunity to possibly move forward with a single payer system or something similar that would actually solve the problem. I'm well acquainted with the problems of Obamacare. I was directly involved with it for a while. It didn't solve the problem. The new approach under this administration may not solve the problem either, so Democrats or somebody should focus on universal health care in the future. Then there are other economic issues. Focus on fair trade. The future focus of all parties in the United States should be on fair trade, because the fact is the United States has been taken advantage of. The future may well involve bilateral agreements as opposed to multinational trade agreements. So that is something progressives should focus on in the future, is fair trade. Then there are other economic issues, and one big one is energy. Fossil fuel is a finite resource. It isn't going to be here forever. But it's not practical to think that there's going to be a turn on the dime and a quick switch to alternative energy. Progressives in the future need to focus like a laser beam on putting all resources that possibly can be put to the task to developing solar, wind, hydrogen, and other forms of alternative energy. There should be a national alcohol program involving the development of sugarcane alcohol as an alternative fuel. Now, here's an important thing. I think a lot of people in Philadelphia, New York, and Boston who are would-be policymakers do not recognize the extent to which so many people in the United States, millions in fact, depend on personal transportation. There seems to be this idea in some so-called progressive quarters that we should just get rid of fossil fuels as quickly as possible. Well, that's not practical at all. You look to Arizona, New Mexico, Wyoming, Idaho, and a lot of the southeast even, people are absolutely dependent on personal transportation. They have to have vehicles of some kind unless they're going to walk or ride a horse or ride a bicycle. So there needs to be a concerted effort to begin a long-term switch toward alternative energy. Electric is making progress. It isn't where it needs to be. Hydrogen is viable, except that it's not affordable right now. There are a lot of potential for wind and solar energy development. Some of the wind energy is being developed in Texas. I've seen that for myself, these huge windmill farms. So there needs to be a concerted effort to begin a gradual switch from fossil fuels toward alternative energy. Now, while that's going on, you want the Permian Basin, the pump jacks in the Permian Basin, to continue to do what they're doing now, because people are utterly dependent on personal transportation, and you can't just impose huge taxes and ease out fossil fuels. So energy should be a big concern in the future in the manner that I just described. Another thing that progressives should do is stop being so naive and stupid about national security. With regard to the refugee ban, the fact is that it is difficult and sometimes impossible to determine the good folks from the bad folks who would come in from these 7 countries where refugees were recently banned. So it's completely illogical that so many people are running around with their hair on fire about this refugee ban. The Secretary of Homeland Security made some of these very points. Democrats need to stop being so naive about this, and they also need to focus a little bit more on national security. National security monies should not be sequestered. There needs to be a lot more emphasis on the U.S. Coast Guard. That's a very important agency. Another thing going forward, the $15 minimum wage works very well in Seattle. Higher minimum wages have worked well in many places. What happens in those cases is that you don't have Armageddon and businesses don't go out of business. There haven't been a huge number of restaurants going out of business in Seattle. As a matter of fact, they've been on something of a hiring binge. A lot of businesses who are opposed to this are opposed to it because, frankly, they're lying. Their whole point is to maintain a certain lifestyle for the people who own the business. A lot of them really can't afford it. They just don't want to afford it. So $15 an hour minimum wage. College affordability needs to be a big issue going forward. Hillary Clinton put forward a proposal, but it wouldn't have gone nearly as far enough. A much better proposal would have been that proposed by Bernie Sanders. So that's important. College affordability, energy, college affordability, $15 minimum wage, universal health care. These are very important things going forward. Another thing that progressives should focus on is regulatory balance. There is a basic problem with bureaucracy in that bureaucracies tend to do things to protect the bureaucracy and expand the mission. The goal of regulation should be, I believe, threefold. 1, consumer protection. 2, worker protection. And 3, environmental protection. And a lot of business protection goes along with that consumer protection as well. Let's remember that consumer spending is 70% of the U.S. economy. So there needs to be a concerted effort to find a balanced approach to regulation. Have you ever opened the Federal Register and read some federal regulations? They can be unbelievably complicated. And I think one reason for that is, as I just said, bureaucracies like to protect themselves, protect their mission, and expand their mission. Instead of that, their focus should be consumer protection, employee protection, and environmental protection. So a big plus for progressives going forward could be a regulatory reform seeking a truly balanced approach to federal regulations. Now, as to Democrats or people who call themselves progressives and they just want to focus on these social issues all the time, I got to tell you, that's not where it's at. What people really care about is how they are able to earn a good living in their daily lives and have health insurance and be reasonably economically secure. People who are raising hell about entitlements all the time fail to realize that there are millions of people in the United States who never had much of an opportunity to prepare for retirement, and now they live on Social Security checks that are just a few $100s. That is something people need to realize. So cutting entitlements isn't going to be a way going forward. Another thing, the student loan crisis. People have gotten trapped in loans that they can't repay, and one of the basic reasons is that a lot of these are not bankruptable, and people are horribly trapped, and the government can even take a lot of Social Security benefits. That's just wrong, and it needs to be revisited. Something needs to be done about the student loan crisis. Another thing is climate change. There needs to be a concerted effort to reduce damage to the climate and protect the environment. Now, as I've said, there can't be a turn on a dime switch from fossil fuels. That isn't going to happen. So a lot of this will involve the development of alternative energy at the same time that the pump jacks are still working in the Permian Basin, working toward a coordinated switch from the current forms of energy to alternative energy in the future. So those are just a few of the basic items that could really move the country forward. And I believe that that's what Democrats or somebody should be focusing on in the future. What they really ought to do is stop acting like big babies and toddlers and pitching temper tantrums and stop refusing to accept blame and focus on the kind of agenda that I just discussed, which could advance the country forward in tremendously positive ways. Will they do it? It's hard to be optimistic at this point, but anyway, there are the ideas. Maybe somebody somewhere will act on them.